Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It's Friday, KSA time, and for no particular reason, we have Eric and Casey on to discuss our most recent, very chill, good vibes episode. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
It also seems like anytime that you need to have more than one person on KSA, it's always the two of us. So sorry, Philip.
Yeah. So for us, this battle is actually substantially in the past because we have been working hard to build up our little more runway for ourselves. Because holidays and other life commitments and that sort of thing. So that's a little weird for us because we have four? Is it four?
I think so.
Yeah. Four.
Yeah, 4 episodes recorded past the battle.
We played twice since this happened.
Yeah. So the aftermath is known to us.
I'm going to press record. I was like, I probably could use a refresher on
where we're at.
What to say and what not to say.
Well, this episode
ended.
Not
that there's anything I can't say.
Right. This episode concluded with a lot all at once. Awry and Cal both died from failed saving throws in the same round. And Shade, in the process of escaping kidnapping, killed Tommel. To the mixed joy and sorrow of our watch party, depending on where you have stood on Tommel as a redemptive figure.
Pretty universal feeling around the table, but yeah.
It didn't seem like there were very mixed feelings among the player characters. But yes, so it was momentous, and it was a long combat. That combat stretched over 2 sessions for us. That was, I think, our longest single combat.
Can't imagine whose fault that is.
Well, it certainly wasn't meant to be one combat. So that's Step 1. If you didn't watch my KSA on big combat encounters, this was intended to be 2 combats. My intention was that the little Sawagan would be a small, relatively easy to overcome challenge that would get in the way of the party until they could, and then they would pursue Tommel to a secondary location where there would be another combat encounter.
I never go to a secondary location ever.
That's true. You should never go to a second location with someone who's not necessarily trustworthy. Yeah. No, I know. But this is, we're at that point where all GM plans meet high-level player character abilities. It is much, much harder to put non-miraculous obstacles between player characters of your level and a goal. And so, once Awry landed and hit Tommel and his cronies, we were now kind of doing two encounters at once, one of which Awry was kind of soloing for a bit there. And so impressively, you guys did actually successfully defeat 2 different combat encounters that I had built, although at substantial cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously. So, all right. So we have a bunch of questions, most of which I think we can answer because they don't particularly ask about what would happen next. They ask about more broad strokes things. And obviously we will just forego questions about what happens next because we know what happens next. And so by giving an answer in either direction, we would inevitably be giving something away. Um, I've killed characters owned by both of you in the past. I've already done this to both of you at various points in our relationships as a GM. Yes. I think Eric is the only person whose character I have ever killed who did not return in some capacity.
Yeah.
Oh no, your very first character. Yes,
you killed two of my characters. 3.
Yes,
now.
the absolute party collapse in our very first campaign.
Yep.
Yeah, that was like session 2. That that went very badly. Yeah, okay. So I have done both of you. Okay, cool. Well, we have
you got a GM for him, Casey, so you can get some vengeance because it is.
That's right. Casey needs to run a
Feywild
adventure.
It's definitely not going to be death of players. It's definitely going to be more bubblegum and lollipops.
Hence, I say Feywild. Casey needs to run a Feywild adventure.
That would be
awesome. Okay, our questions begin with Emily, who had a question for Casey and Colin. Colin's working, so he could not join us, so we'll ask for Casey. Emily says, I know this question is cruel, and I apologize for that. She's going to ask it anyway. If your character had to choose, if Shade had to choose to bring back one from the dead and the other would stay dead permanently, would they bring back Awry or Cal?
That is such a mean question.
It's because we all know what the answer is and you feel bad about it, and that's fine.
It's really true. I as a character, Shade feels more responsible for Cal. That's who she sees herself as, the guardian and protector of. She worries about Awry and his ability to take care of himself, but she doesn't feel like she's responsible for him in the same way. And so I think she would choose Cal because of that. I don't feel good saying that.
Awry made his own bed.
I think that's part of it too, is Cal fights because of Shade. And so, in these situations, there is, an autonomy that Awry has that Cal doesn't.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense.
And I mean that outside of the meta gaming aspect, like just.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Awry.
So speaking to Cal's death, you immediately afterward identified the moment at which Cal was going to die, because you had been thinking about getting him away, but you didn't want to use his Misty Step and then need it later.
Major regrets.
Yeah. Eric, is there a moment where you suddenly realized, Ari's not going to get out of this? Or, I mean, I know you elected to take the damage that knocked you, but.
Yeah. There was a component, I forget what the ability was, but there was something I could have done when Tommel moved away from me to go after Shade that would have stopped him. Because I have Warcaster. I just opted for a regular opportunity attack instead of using a spell, and I could have done something to physically stop Tommel. And I think if Awry could have pulled that off, then it goes very differently, because then Shade doesn't disappear, so Awry doesn't lose his head, and yada yada yada. So that was kind of the moment where I was like, if I would have done that, then things probably could have turned out differently for everyone. But
Emily asks Eric, this is a question for you, followed by a related one for me. would you have considered Awry to potentially be a dark prince, or at least the avatar of one, whose rise to power has been brought forth by the Traveler? I've been meaning to ask that ever since the prophecy, re the Traveler and the Dark Prince, was brought up. Better late than never. Cry, cry, cry. To read the emojis.
Yes. I honestly had never considered that up to this point. So to answer your question, I did not consider it. I think it would be cool, like, and neat, and my particular brand of torturing my own player characters. But yeah, it wasn't on my mind.
Relatedly, Philip, when did you first come up with the prophecy about a time of darkness when a dark prince will rule brought forth by the Traveler? Was this before or after the nature of Awry's curse was hashed out? Well, that's a very generous way to begin your question. When did I come up with? The answer is never. I never came up with that. That's right out of the City of Stormreach book. All of the... So I pulled NPCs from the City of Stormreach book, I think all of them, and offered a small selection from each from that big list to each of the players at the beginning of the campaign, and said, tell me one of these you have a good relationship with, one of these you have a bad relationship with. And some of them overlapped. Solarka was on both Pog and Shade's list. I think there was an overlap. There was a couple of other overlaps. But anyway, Eric picked Berrigan Inge, who's a relative of Jonas Wilkes, who's an entitled jerk and who we encountered. And you guys eventually killed him, right? Like straight up killed him.
Yeah. Wait,
He's just
with the Sogwin.
He went to meet with the Salgan. So you guys didn't kill him, but odds are not good for good old Barrett. He's totally, as far as we know, he's fine.
He's gone swimming with Greg, which is now the
That's what I was thinking.
when anybody dies.
Greg.
They went swimming with Greg.
They're good.
Went swimming with the Salgan. And then the positive relationship was Lupe, who I drew from a section in the book about a set of secretive organizations that all focus on the Draconic prophecies. So I gave that to Eric, and Eric picked that. And then just as the NPCs that everybody had sort of latched onto were kind of fixed and became the ones that we focused on. And so I never really got back to, we never really got into like Zot and his rivalry with Pog and that sort of thing. And so Lupe just kind of went by the roadside. And when Awry got banished and we had the mysterious figure show up, not that I'm suggesting that's the Traveler, it was nowhere in my mind. But yes, it is hilarious the ways in which Ari's progression has mirrored that. Yeah. So it was well before, and I swear I engineered nothing about what has happened to Awry with that in mind. I completely forgot about it until Awry brought up Lupe at the beginning of the race. And you can see that as proof. I suggest that you go back and you look at the moment where Eric reads it and watch both me and Eric go. Because Eric is reading it, and Eric actually, like, you actually pause and go, oh.
Yep.
So yes. Nope. Totally forgot about that. Pure storytelling and dice that have brought us to this point. It is an interesting thread to see whether we could do anything with that or not. But yes. Eric, considering how often Awry would get knocked out earlier in the campaign, are you surprised that he lived this long? Alternatively, did you think he would ever actually die?
I'm not surprised that he lived this long because, we had good resources to, get people back on their feet in terms of class cohesion and healing potions and the healing surges mechanic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I never I never really thought that Awry was going to be in danger earlier in the campaign of like dying. In terms of whether or not I thought he was going to die, I was never opposed to it. I just always wanted it to be um something that was meaningful, like him kind of going out on his own terms sounds wrong because but just not a random fight in the street that, oh, Awry went down, rolled 3 death saving throws, and he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this way of like Ari's spirit or ethereal nature or whatever would at least be contented knowing that like he went out trying to help Shade. And yeah, so I was never against him dying, never like actively working towards him dying though, which I have had player characters like that where it's like, okay, I'm done with this person, let's get them gone. But yeah,
it's true. Darren asks me, if it was going to be a TPK in this situation, would you have let an NPC like Thora save the party, or would you feel that the dice should decide? Thanks. It's nice to be thanked after a session like that. So honestly, I would probably, if it turned into that, and it didn't feel like there was no point at which it felt like everyone's gonna die. Paul got real close, and that I got real nervous there for a minute. But yeah, it was dicey. I would probably pause our recording and have a conversation with the players and see how the players felt about this scene and whether we were all okay letting the party be slain and defeated, and picking up the narrative with, I don't know, Dane's crew or something like that, or the kids, or I think that would be the kids are not equipped for this campaign, but you know, or something else. Like there would need to be, I would have a conversation with my players about that. I'm not against rescuing a party. I don't think it cheapens anything. I think it really is kind of what does the story call for, and how will the players feel about it. If the players are going to feel kind of cheated by that, then I don't like that so much. I'm in general, if a TPK really does just happen, because there's plenty of occasions where this sort of thing can happen and there's not anyone to save them on hand, then usually my inclination is, okay, you wake up in a cell, because, you know, oh man, I can't talk about that yet. Yeah. Bad guys have all sorts of super powerful magic available to them. And especially at a high level like this, the player characters are important. The player characters know things that the bad guys want to know. They have, I mean, as we saw, you know, Shade has particular information that Kulsir and his minions want. And so having the bad guys use revivify, reincarnate, raise dead, that kind of stuff, in order to get information out of the player characters, I think is a very interesting way of carrying forward a story while still having the players genuinely get defeated. A player defeat should have consequences. It doesn't necessarily have to have the consequences of everybody's dead. Unless that's how everybody feels is the most logical, most narratively satisfying conclusion to a story. So that's kind of where I was. And honestly, that'd be the kind of, like, if Shade and Awry were both dead, it was just Pog alive, that would need to be a serious conversation, because how do you go on with just one of the original party alive? Like what do we do there? And we would need to figure out where to go. So I would not make that decision on my own. I would not make the decision in a vacuum. I would involve my players in the decision of whether or not this is what has happened with the dice. How do we all feel about it? It's kind of where I am.
I like that as a cast, we would have a feelings conversation. We do. We love to have those.
I mean, every time a player character has died in any of my campaigns, with the exception of Ezri's first death in this one, where he met Erandis, I had already decided very early that I wanted to do that if Ezri ever died. And I wasn't sure I was going to get that chance because, Awry was fairly careful with his character. Other than that, anytime I've had a player character in a campaign actually die, I have always had a conversation with that player character about, are you done with this character? There's 8,000 ways in D&D for a character to come back to life, to the degree that unless you put some sort of gate on it in the world, it's frankly astonishing that anybody stays dead. So I don't think it's implausible for great heroic characters to be brought back, or be sent back by gods or any number of other things like that. So I always have a conversation with the player character to find out what is their feeling about this. What are you done with this character? Is it more satisfying for you to go out in this heroic way, or you want to do more things with this character? So obviously I've just told you that's the conversation me and Eric had after this past session. We just won't tell you what we decided. Until, you'll figure it out, obviously. Emily asks, all the players, fine, I'll just sit here quietly. If your character died and got reincarnated, which race from the player handbook table would you want your character to be reincarnated as? And would this be different from what they would want to be reincarnated as?
Casey, do you want to go first?
I'm looking at the list.
Oh, and then she follows up least. What would you least like your character to be reincarnated as?
I mean, Awry would want to be reincarnated as a half elf because he lost that. He misses it. Like he would like to come back as that. I at least probably, I'm going to say something controversial, probably a dwarf. And that's both me and Awry. Me as a player, I've just always bounced off it. Like, I don't feel like I role play dwarves well. Like, I don't know. That's just, I've only tried to do it once, and it was one of the most despised characters by my fellow players I've ever played. And so
I don't think that had to do with the race.
I know. But
I would probably want my character to come back as a gnome. I enjoy playing gnomes. I think Shade would want to come back, a forest gnome, or a wood elf. Just that tie to the forest is so important to her. That is what she would want to come back as. She would hate to come back as anything that would be very separated from nature. I don't. I don't know. I think she would have a hard time being a mountain dwarf. That would not be.
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of it would come down to there's, different ancestries in different worlds have a vibe to them. And I would have a weird, it would feel weird to me. So obviously gnomes to me have a particular vibe, which you all have encountered in various incarnations. It would be very weird for me to be playing like playing an elf or playing a half orc or something like that, and have that personality in the body of a gnome. Like there's just a vibe that comes with it. And to me, the juxtaposition would be hard and not fun, but I can totally see that being hilarious from other perspectives. Samalander asks, any of the cast, do you keep a backup character in case of the worst, or do you wait until you know that the lost character will be unrecoverable?
I don't keep backup characters. I have character concepts in the back of my head, but I don't build them until necessary. So, yeah.
I don't keep backup characters, and I rarely have character concepts. I usually come up with them as needed, and it takes me a while to flesh them out. So, RA has character concepts. Like he constantly identifies characters or a mixture of characters that would be fun to play, and likes to explore those. And my brain just doesn't work that way.
I have lots of character concepts like Eric does. As a GM, one of the reasons I build so many NPCs that we interact with is kind of as backup characters. Because one of the awkwardnesses of losing a player character is, okay, how do we bring someone else in that we're going to all get on? And like, that would be really hard in this campaign, just because of the particular theme of it. But, at this point, if we had to reassemble a new adventuring party out of NPCs, it wouldn't be a party of aberrant marked individuals anymore, but we could totally assemble a viable adventuring party made up entirely of NPCs. But this part.
Yeah.
Ooh, which NPC would you want to take over as an adventurer? No limits. Any NPC. Which NPC would you want to take over as an adventurer if you had to carry on the fire?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm trying to go through the list in my head.
Eric wants to go to an evil campaign.
Right.
Because the one we're in right now isn't dark enough.
Right.
Honestly,
I would like to play Malcolm. Just like that. That would be a fun character, especially with like the animal companion. Like that would be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, my first thought was Ilya. But I'm not cool enough to play Ilya. Like, she's the coolest. I think my second would, and I know it's so cheesy, but I think Harish would probably be my second. Like, he just really, I just want to fix you a bowl of soup and make you feel better. And I think that would be a fun departure from what I have been playing in this campaign.
Just cats everywhere.
Yes.
Fun. Very good. Emily, it pains me to type this, but if Awry...
Stop doing this to yourself, Emily.
But if Awry is unable to be brought back to life, what do you think he'd like his funeral to be like? Did he have any will or other end-of-life instructions for what he'd want his funeral to be like or anything? If he didn't, does this have anything to do with having grown up with the curse of being forgotten after he died, or more just the fact that 20-somethings don't expect to die, despite Awry's line of work as an adventurer?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's not a robust end-of-life plan that Awry has laid out, primarily because of just, you're in your 20s, so you're going to live forever kind of mentality. So I do think that there are, like, in some of the journals and stuff that's in his room, there are some, like, if you're reading this, I'm dead kind of stuff, like, and it's just shade, pog, divvy it up however you like. But in terms of what he would like his funeral to be like, I mean, ideally, it's a unity dinner. Like it's just people coming together and like the important thing for him is, unsurprisingly, people coming together to remember him and just kind of celebrate who he was and what he would have, like, blue skies, ideal scenario. That lingering curse that he has to say a poem to get anybody to actually remember him would go away, and you know, all of his family that don't remember him still would like remember who he was and his memory and stuff like that, because that's the thing that I think still weighed heavily on Awry, is the fact that there are so many people that like it, like his grandparents, like they still don't know who he is, and that just is one of those things that in the back of his mind like eats away at him because they're important people to him. So yeah, that's kind of where Ari's at.
Yeah,
that's tragic and beautiful.
The Shane MacGowan, the lead singer of the Irish folk punk band The Pogues, recently died. And his funeral was a jam session. The rest of the Pogues were there, and every famous Irish singer who could make it showed up, and they just jammed out to old Shane MacGowan songs, and people were dancing in the aisles of the church and all these things like that. It was really sweet. Emily says, Philip and Eric, the spell Reincarnate was written before WotC started allowing non-humanoid humanoid PC lineages, and it specifies that it only works on humanoids. Would you allow it to be used on a non-humanoid player character?
I, for my part, would not. It has not come up yet. It never did come up, but the instant Philip would have tried to use like hold person or something on Awry, I would have thrown the he's not a humanoid. It doesn't work. So I would not ask the inverse positive to then work for Ari's benefit. So yeah.
Broadly, I think I would probably have I think I would have a conversation with the player, and my inclination would be one of two things. My inclination is usually I tend to favor whatever benefits the story the player is telling with their character. And so if the player is like, yes, yes, please, then I'd probably be willing to forego that. I think an interesting alternative would be to make a secondary list of fey creatures that the player character might get reincarnated as, and cause reincarnate to be really weird when you're a fey. Yeah. Because, you know, there are mortal fey, but in general, fey are kind of reformed in their story. And so, I mean, this would obviously require potentially require a lot of house ruling depending on what you rolled. But I mean, there are fey attached player lineages already, firbolgs and various animal folk and things like that, fairies. But I think it would be hilarious to include like pixies and quicklings and eladrin and satyrs and
dryads.
Yeah.
Hag. Awry comes back as a hag.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So that would be sort of what I would want to do. And I guess that would apply to Shade too, as a Kitsune, is make a all fey reincarnation list, and you come back as one of those instead of as what you possibly were. And I think that would be my way to have fun with it. If it was me.
A red cap would be hilarious to come back as a player character. Just so
Awry
and small.
Awry would obviously come back as a darkling. Like that's the most goth fey.
Yeah.
On offering. No, I think a quickling would be a hilarious player character option.
Mm-hmm.
I've never gotten to use quicklings extensively. I think they're delightful.
I'm gonna have to look up so many of these.
In our home game, I used Quickling one time when you guys were stuck in that maze. There was a Quickling running along there. They're really like super fast Fae that are tricksy. Last question comes from Laura, and it's about Tommel. What was Tommel's intention for stealing Shade? I'm not going to tell you. Did you think he would survive this long? It feels like it's mostly for me. Yes. I didn't necessarily think he would get away as many times as he did. Like the encounter underground, I was really prepared for the PCs to successfully capture Tommel, and obviously dice went in some ways that made that a hard encounter. But yeah, I didn't necessarily think he would escape all the times that he has successfully escaped. And I really did think he might die during the very first crisis with Tommel, where he threatened the kids, because I think we were sort of on the very edge of gathering a gang and going after him hard.
That was what Colin wanted, yeah.
Which would have really significantly changed the course of this campaign. And would have been I had all the notes necessary for that. Like, I was totally prepared for you guys to make that call and go gather the moon spears and get some muscle up and go take down the Stormhammers. But here we are. Now, can we know what fricked up stuff happened with him between the last time we saw him and now? No. Do you think there was ever a scenario in which Tommel became unradicalized? I want to know what the players think. Do you guys think at this point there has been a scenario where you could have gotten through to Tommel?
I'm optimistic, and I think so. I mean, there were moments, especially in which Shade tried to engage with him, and he seemed to respond, and he seemed, regretful from some of his actions. So I like to think so.
Yeah, not without getting him. Like the brief encounters we had with him during combat, where it was like, you don't have to do this, and then him going back to, like, that was never going to work without like
right.
getting him away from Kolsir and Mirren. I don't think. And also, I mean, going into this fight, the reason Awry went so hard after Tommel is you kind of hit a point where, yeah, you're sad about the stuff you're doing. You're still doing it. Like, I don't care what your attitude is. You're still trying to kidnap one of my friends that I care about. So, like, yeah, like,
sure.
Awry just got exhausted with the concept, because the last fight, the underground fight, I feel like I tried to play. Awry really tried to get through to Tommel and be like, stop doing this. Like, and even tried to use suggestion on him, and just that was the point where Awry just felt like it was not going to happen, and so yeah, that's kind of where the ship sailed for Awry. Eric is a player, probably. I think we probably could have pulled it off, but at the same time, you hit a point of diminishing returns where even if we got Tommel away, like, this fight goes totally different. We get Tommel away somehow. How far down the rabbit hole do we need to go with him before we actually trust that he's unradicalized and not just biding his time to do something terrible? Because he's been with Kolsir for so long. He rightfully feels like he owes his life to Mirren because of the whole morning thing. And so that bond goes so deep. So, like, I don't think Awry would have ever, even if Tommel did become unradicalized, I don't think Awry would have ever trusted that it was going to stick. So,
well, and especially with our group, I mean, we're such a cynical group.
Yeah, when Ari's given up on you, boy, like, I don't think there's any hope with this group. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, yes, that scenario definitely existed at various points. Because otherwise, he becomes a flat character and that's not as interesting. Where exactly, how exactly would have, it would have required the player characters putting other things to the side to make that a priority. And just in the course of the campaign, that was never the main priority. Was let's find a way to separate Tommel from the source of his ideas and see if we can get through to him.
Well, I think the big misstep that Tommel made in that effort was very early on threatening the kids. I feel like that really set a pretty big deficit for the player characters because even like in Awry's mind, like you weren't radicalized at that point. Like you were doing the bidding Mirren, like, so you were just a jerk. Like you were like best case scenario, a jerk, worst case, a sociopath. Like, and so it's like, how much do I really want to associate with you? So yeah. And I think also part of it is like in the session 0 and early stages, we kind of said that Tommel was an older sibling mentor figure, but I don't know if any of us really dove into the nature of that relationship when he re-entered the campaign. I don't think any of us really latched onto, oh, it's Tommel, like you taught me so much, like let's be friends. So I do wonder how different things would have played out if we would have stuck around and waited for him to come to the Sword and Shield instead of going after the Boggle that night when he showed up and we weren't there and he got kicked out. So but
that was many moons ago.
Yeah.
Many inflection points. All good content for our what if camp. No.
You're right.
No, not right. Not no. D&D was save points.
Can we rewind back to?
No, we can't. Cool. Well, that is all of our questions. Thank you all so much for submitting questions. Thank you guys for making time to be on today. We will be back with a new episode with Aftermath on Monday. If you'd like to get in touch with us in the meantime, you can find all of our links in the description down below and can always get in touch with us in comments on this video. New episode on Monday, new Khyber Shards answers on Friday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.